everybody. Welcome back to another Sunday night discussion here at Hmong American Weekly about politics in the Hmong community. I'm joined this evening by one of my co-hosts, Representative Yee Hang, political scientist Yee Hang is unable to join us today. And as many of you know, we started the show, Jay Paku and I, during the 2020 election to really combat political disinformation that was being spewed into the Hmong community. The goal of this show is to build a vibrant and resilient political consciousness. And we think one of the best ways to do this is really about exploring and talking about the important issues in our community to better understand them. And we wanted to say first, happy belated Hmong American Day, everybody, and also Asian Pacific Heritage Month. Yesterday was also a really important day. It was Armed Forces Day. And that's the day in 1949 when the Secretary of Defense officially created an Armed Forces Day to replace, there used to be a separate Army, Navy, and Air Force days. And so the single day celebration stemmed from the unification of all the armed forces under one department at the Department of Defense. And Armed Forces Day is celebrated on the third Saturday of May. And so in addition to Armed Forces Day, a really important holiday this month is Memorial Day, which was originally established to remember US military who died in service to the United States during the Civil War and became a federally recognized holiday in 1971. So given all these momentous occasions, we wanted today to talk a little bit about the role of the military service, and in particular, US service in the US military. And I know a lot of Hmong people and non-Hmong people are familiar with the story of the Hmong veterans who fought in the Secret War, folks like our grandfathers and fathers and uncles. But what some people might not know is that the military service continues to be practiced among current and future generations of Hmong Americans today. And so today's show, we are really excited to talk about Hmong Americans who have currently or have served in one of the 6 branches of the US Armed Forces: the Army, Air Force, Coast Guard, Marines, Navy, and Space Force. Tonight, we're joined by 3 amazing guests who have served or are currently serving in the US Armed Forces. Our first guest is Colonel Yee Hang. He grew up in Richville, Michigan. Upon graduation of the US Military Academy at West Point, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the US Army. As a military officer, he served in many different operational assignments in the Republic of Korea, in the United States, in Colorado, and in Germany. Colonel Hang has worked in the Army Acquisition Corps and at several Army facilities, and most recently served as Director of Land Supplier Operations for the Defense Logistics Agency, Land and Maritime in Columbus, Ohio. Colonel Hang has 1 operational deployment to Bosnia-Herzegovina and 4 deployments to Afghanistan, Kuwait, and Iraq. He has received several awards and decorations, including the Defense Superior Service Medal and the Bronze Star Medal. He has received several awards for his service in the Army, and in 2015 was selected as one of the top 100 candidates for the John C. Maxwell Leadership Award. And to our knowledge, not currently, but he has been one of the highest ranking Hmong Americans who have served in the US military, and you've since retired, correct, Colonel Hang? Yes, he's retired. Our second guest is also another retired. Dr. Tou Yang is a Tou Theng Yang. Did I say your name right? He received an ROTC scholarship to attend Cretin University School of Pharmacy and graduated with a BS degree in 1988. After graduation, he received his commission as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army Medical Service Corps, but his education did not end there. He went on to earn his Doctor of Pharmacy from the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities in 1990, becoming one of the first few refugees to receive a doctorate. Yang also went on active duty in June 1991. Since then, Dr. Tou has been stationed in Georgia and California, Hawaii, Texas, Washington, Germany, and South Korea as well. He's also been deployed on several, many times, including training missions to Kosovo, humanitarian missions to El Salvador, and to 2 combat zones, including Operation Iraqi Freedom in Iraq, as well as Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. Dr. Yang has held every leadership position within the Army's pharmacy operations, culminating in the Director of Pharmacy at 3 tertiary medical centers. He too is very decorated and has won many different military awards, including the Bronze Star Medal as well, and several other commendations. After 28 years of duty, he officially retired from the Army in 2019. And our third guest this evening is Major Hnub Lauj Vwj, who grew up in Hickory, North Carolina. She graduated from the University of North Carolina, where she was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Air Force. She also has her master's in public management from the University of Maryland. As a military officer, she has been stationed in Texas, California, Virginia, and she's presently stationed in Germany, where she's a staff officer at NATO headquarters. She also works as a contracting officer for the Air Force and does current contract support for the Standing Joint Logistics Support Group. Oh, it's a mouthful. At headquarters in Ulm, Germany, where she is calling from today. Major Vwj has been deployed to Kyrgyzstan, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan, and has been serving for 12 years on active duty. She too is a very decorated service member and received several awards, including the Defense Meritorious Service Medal and an Air Force Commendation Medal. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Terry. Gujong Shang da Nuno, Bemo Betoko Chising, Donju Beshitang, John Nuno, Dr. Yang, Akernaha, Major Vwj will be joining us shortly. But May, all in all, to Tono Neme, she timing Jijo Bay, Janya, the one that she bought at the Yabi Lekang, it's all joining the US military.
Okay. Well, good being there. First of all, qhua because one thing good evening and happy Armed Forces Day. Thank you to our hosts for giving us this opportunity to talk with you. I joined the military. Initially was to pay for college. I have 4 brothers and 3 sisters, and I realized that would be a huge financial strain on the family. So the military gave me that opportunity. So after I graduated from West Point, I had a 5-year commitment. So my plan was to do my initial 5 years and then get out, because as a 18-year-old high school senior, you realize that 4 years of college and then 5 years of military service, that's 9 years. That's a long time. So I decided to do my 5 and then get out. Hello. But as I served, I realized the military provides stability. I always had a job, but it also gave me the opportunity to travel and see the world. I think finally, I served because I think our country, it's a great country, has problems, but it gives us a lot of opportunities to do whatever you want, as long as you put in the effort to do that. So yeah, so that's why I joined the military.
Dr. Yang, same question to you. Share with us why you decided to join the U.S. military.
Okay, 我叫个咩情叫古段就咩西塘路呢古中沙it's a great opportunity to tell our story. Should bet your younger people need some more opportunity. Hey, bet your bet more to reach what they call it, field grade officers, like executive level at that particular level. Who joined the military? The military. So be good. Join the military. Always, I've never thought about anything else besides joining the military. That's how I got in. But 3 things that really make me want to join the military. Appreciation for the great American society, great democracy. Being from a war-torn country, coming to the U.S., I see that the opportunity here in the military is vastly different than what the SGU went through, and so I look at that as an opportunity for me to, as a refugee, to advance in the society, and that gives me the opportunity to move ahead. And the second part is that coming to the U.S. is the American people specifically for me is that I have the Rashlo family that they extended their hand and put foster good into their family. So I have 5 American sisters and 2 American brother. So I have a large family. On my Hmong side, I have 3 Hmong sisters and 4 Hmong brother. And then on American side, I have 5 sisters and then 2 brothers. So, but the Rashlo really shaped in how the American society actually looks at how democracy and how they work, and they really have a great influence for me to join, to go into the Army. And then last, of course, is my late father, Tou Theng Yang. So he's a major in the SGU. And so seeing how he lead his soldiers, the people, the leadership quality that he shows and care about the community and the people that surround him really motivate me to continue his legacy as a military leader. So that's how I joined the Army. And so, of course, the ROTC gives you a 4-year obligation, but since I have always never thought about anything else besides that, it's just a continuation for me until the Army say, okay, we no longer want you. It's time for you to retire. So then that's how I retire from the Army.
Well, thank you again, Major Lauj Vwj, for joining us tonight. Could you tell us a little bit, much like we asked other panelists, why you decided to join the U.S. military?
So to be honest with you, I joined the military because I had this grand idea of what the military was like, right? And so I thought that if I joined the military, I was going to, go and travel the world. My main concern was I wanted to get out of North Carolina because I wasn't born in North Carolina, but I was raised in Hickory, North Carolina. So I was like, I'm going to get out of Hickory, North Carolina. I want to see the world. And the original plan was to join the military out of high school. And of course, I'll get into this later, but I was going to join the military out of high school. And when I sat down with my parents, I said, I think I'm going to join the military, and mainly because I want to see the world. And, when you're a poor Hmong, I wouldn't say poor, but we were, your average Hmong family. The idea of traveling the world and, just backpacking through Europe or Asia was not really in the cards for us. So I thought, I'm going to join the military and then they will send me across the world and I can travel. My dad was like, I'm the oldest of 4 and I'm also the only girl. So my parents kind of hesitated and they told me we would prefer you to go to college first, just because we want you to set a good example for your brothers. And so I told them I really, really wanted to go and travel. And my dad made a deal with me because when he was younger, he wanted to join the military. But my uncle, he said, if you join the military, who's going to take care of your mom, right? My grandma. So my dad decided not to join the military because of that, because he had family obligations. So growing up, I've always known about that. So I told him, well, you wanted to join the military, so what is wrong with me joining the military? So my dad said, I'll make a deal with you. Go and do 1 year of college. Go and do 1 year of college. And if you decide that you still want to join the military afterwards, I won't stop you. You have my blessing, and I'll even drive you to wherever it is that you need to go to. And, I will be completely supportive of you joining the military, but I want you to at least do 1 year of college so that your brothers understand that education is important, right? So I said, okay, fine, I can do 1 year of college. And I ended up going to college, ended up falling into the ROTC program. And I also ended up falling in love with just being at the university and finding myself. So next thing I know, I'm 4 years in, I'm getting my degree. And at that point, I'm getting my commission as a United States Air Force officer. So that was kind of how it kind of happened. It really just fell into my lap. I wish I could say, oh, it was a grand plan, but it wasn't. It just really fell into my lap. And I was lucky that that happened, and it really was because my dad was like, go to college first.
Tell us a little bit earlier when I talked about your bios. You mentioned where you've been serviced, and tell us a little bit about the countries you visited. I know, and I think the thing is because we are always so fascinated about different cultures and communities, and in your military service really allowed you to go learn from other people and also go tell people about who Hmong people are, right? So tell us a little bit about your experiences on active duty and where you've gone
to. For me, in my introduction, I mentioned that the military gives you a chance to see the world. And that definitely has lived up to its promise. My first assignment was to Korea. I was there for 18 months, and Moog Hang, my name is Moog Hang. So the Koreans have a similar, they have a similar pronunciation, Hang, but they spell Hwang. So when I was there, a lot of the Korean soldiers always thought I was Korean. So they would come to me and speak Korean to me. And I always tell them, no, I'm not Korean. So it was kind of neat. But I also spent 4 years in Germany. While I was there, I spent 9 months in Bosnia. I also spent some time in Turkey and Poland. We've also been to Switzerland, France, Belgium, Denmark. Also to Afghanistan, Iraq twice, Kuwait, Djibouti, and Uzbekistan. I think what's neat about that is that as you travel the world and you talk to different people, and you have a better understanding of who they are. And I think when it comes down to it, they're all good people. Most of them, they want the same thing we do. They want stability for their family. They want to keep them safe. They want to provide for them. And as you talk to people, you understand that they cherish what we have here in the United States. When I was in Iraq, I had a barber, and his dream was to come to Montana and to open up a barber shop so that he could provide for his family. And it's just really neat. And also you understand that the world is not what you think it is. Like when I went to Bosnia, I thought Bosnia was like, France or Germany, but it's so different. It's almost kind of like a backward country because they have carts that they pull with cows and horses as their means of transportation. So you just don't think of that when you think of, because Bosnia is in Europe. So it's really, it gives you a better appreciation of the world, and you get to understand, at least for me, it opened my perspective of what the world consists of and the people that they are. Because I was born in Laos, and so I knew that perspective from Laos, and I came over when I was 7. So being able to travel the world and see the different cultures and experience the different people, it really makes you appreciate what you have. One quick story is when I was in Afghanistan, we adopted a small village, and we went to this village, and we gave them pencils and papers, and these kids, they were so appreciative of just having a piece of paper and a pen and a crayon. Our kids they're so, they have no idea. So just to see the gratitude of these kids, and just for the small things that we take for granted, really makes you appreciate what we have. So, thank you.
Yeah, what y'all good. Yeah, so I get to travel the same way like Yee Hang. So I've been to Germany, and I actually follows Colonel Hang there down in Baumholder. I was down in Baumholder for a whole year, but instead of living in Baumholder, I travel from Ramstein Air Force Base up at Launchstoel. I traveled that road every morning and every evening down to Baumholder. And actually, when I went down there, some of the staff at the hospital, some of the civilian staff at the hospital, I believe Colonel Hang's wives used to work there as a respiratory therapist, and they used to ask me, do you know him? And I said, yeah, he's my cousin. So I kind of follow his footsteps. I did go to Kosovo as a training, and like Colonel Hang says, it's quite different than Germany or France, right? Then I also went to get stationed in Korea, and I have same experience because Yang is a very common name in Korean, and so they do the same thing. The difference is between my experience in Korea is that they look at me as very respectable, but when they look at my wife, they look at very demeaning. Why is that? Nửa ta nó cũng cho Cầu Lì cũng hạt tàu lu Cầu Lì nó chế bố sai rong gọi là cứ nửa cho tao này cứ cho tao này Thái hay cho tao này Philippines bố cho tao okay xí nè chế they treat her like that chế wherever we go they treat me differently than they treat my wife until they know that she's my wife chế bố họ cho hắn là mà ta oh okay tụi nó ya Colonel Young's wife, the tone and the demeanor is totally different. They suddenly change. They go experience nhá cho Cầu Lì mà người Rong lên đó. Cho bây giờ tôi này là chỉ Rong gọi là cứ Cầu Lì ha, Nhật Bản ha, số bắt tay họ là bắt sai, giờ ta thôi thì giờ you chỉ học bắt cho lưu, nó chỉ bắt sai Rong gọi là cứ you cái chăm bộ, nó same thing when I went to El Salvador. El Salvador mà nó remind của lại cứ thầu cứ bé chỉ nhớ tới chấm lò. Thì ta có một ilu village nó nè, chỉ có một ilu nhiều chế cứ một bé hông, chỉ có kha lại cứ chấm như này hiện họ đã nửa kha hoặc bé lu nhiều hông họ đã xí chế thầu cứ bé lu hospital bé một chỗ họ đã bé do medical readiness medrep by support what you have better American healthcare is here we would go in to these little huts that have divided into 3 rooms, so they would use 1 room for examination, 1 room for treatment, and then they would save 1 room for the pharmacy, which I take care of, and then the dentist would be pulling teeth underneath the tree on the outside, and the vision doctor, they would do the exam outside also. So it's very reminiscent of bây giờ tới chồng block có cái hông ít cho hông bên này ít luôn chế tới Japan mình ai là họ nó sư tới mà they use it as their school, right? So that brings back those memories that I could remember cho khỏi nhớ tới chồng block của tôi cần đại sư không thi sòng nói là that's 4th grade aside from that the people are very nice, but for your healthcare system nhớ cho bất chờ nè kumong in El Salvador at the Air Force base that's supposed to be the premier Air Force base. I walk into their pharmacy and bố một chua là cứ ít bộ chi Txawj Thieng Yaaj American, we are here, we coming in and we say I brought in over 2,000 different drugs, and I said we do more chua chi Txawj但是嘛同佢個by shake up嗰 pharmacy 呢幫我做咧佢都做阿波樣錯呢你覺得 oh my gosh nhớ cho tới chờ nó nè, tao có cho tôi này nó healthcare nó như chỉ trong này cứ tới chờ mình cả, so we should be very appreciative nhớ cho mình cần tới chờ nó trong cái bé mua nó đau dạng hay cho bé cho tôi này, tới khi mà có tất cả một cho tới chờ cứ tới world country lên nó chỉ bố mua mình kinh tế hơn là bố chỉ mua chua cho bố nó chỉ mua chua cho bố sáng chỉ như trong cái này cứ tại you bố tế mình nhiều tới hơn là My deployment to Iraq is I was part of the Bello Hospital. It's a 212 MASH. It's a mobile surgical army hospital. We travel with the combat team. We travel not with them, but we travel behind them, and there'll be another combat team behind us. So I could remember from one side of the mountain to the other side, because Hulu Valley, and we lived in the south of the airport, and I could see all the firefight, all the flares, and all the tracer going back and forth between the mountain. And so when I was in Iraq in 2003, that part of gives me a very vivid memory of Iraq, Afghanistan in 2011. Mấy cho cứ mấy tao nhớ lòng cháy ngày mấy tao bù mấy tao nó cho lúa to nè, thầu cứ cho lúa to nè chị bên nhau là các sản như hồng chị cho lúa to chị cho lúa thầu bên chế một cho bên cầu sản như hồng cho thầu cho chế bên chị bên nhau go to the Kandahar in Afghanistan. So we were in MWR. Là sĩ chị có nó lưu xuống đó boom là sĩ chị rong gọi lại bắt đầu cho lúa hàng là chị very reminiscent học cái nhau lòng cháy từ hàng nó xưa mà chế tế chờ nó ha tế chờ plan nữa thầu tia ta tua trò cả lỡ nó chế there is no different when bullets stop flying there is no different between cứ ta có ya từ cú ya từ thầu cho lúa to nó chế sẽ có những chỉ bảo ta lúc nó ya lúc hospital lúc nó chỉ lúc hospital nó là chế nếu or lại họ nói chế nếu remind cú lại họ nói ta pe nhớ tới chờ nó chỉ có advance hay bộ lại chàng bộ một nhớ hồng bộ lại chàng bộ một thanh bộ lại chàng bộ một trăm một pháo rong lại chàng này thầu cứ ship to cả to là nó chỉ có nhớ đó chỉ cho một chữ thì nó nên chỉ distinguish cả tại cái này là medical person cái này là civilian cái này là military tôi nên cho mỏ tôi nên cho to thì họ này rong lại tôi dạng là cứ thầu bên nhau lòng kênh bên nhau tới chấm bò lại họ sao.
Talk to us a little bit about why the Air Force branch of the armed services.
I laugh because when you're in the military, we all have this like family dynamic and we argue about which branch was better. Really, I joined the Air Force really because my dad wanted to join the Air Force when he was younger. And I mean, I grew up hearing him talk about how much he wished that he did join, but he couldn't because he had to take care of my grandma and his family and all that. So I thought, okay, why not the Air Force? And so, yeah, that was kind of one of the big reasons why I joined the Air Force. It was really for my dad.
Oh, no, hey, that's a great reason. I think it's very sweet, actually.
Colonel Hang, to our knowledge, you are one of the highest ranking Hmong Americans who have served in the U.S. military. Can you share with us about your journey into this role of becoming colonel and what that means to you?
Yes. First of all, I feel very lucky and honestly very honored. However, I would gladly give up that distinction. So my hope and my dream is that one day we will see a Hmong American as a general officer. So for all those of you who are serving, no pressure, no pressure to you. But I think as Tan and I and Mejibu too, if you need assistance along the way to help guide you or providing mentorship, feel free to reach out to us and we will gladly share lessons learned that we have accumulated along the way, things to do, things not to do. That way we can kind of help you along your path as to what you want to do. So, I'm very grateful, obviously, to my father, who was a major in the war, and all the Hmong men and women who served in the war in Laos. They sacrificed so much. So I understand what this rank means to the Hmong community. And it's just not to Hmong Ham, but it's to all the Hmong communities. So whichever clan gets to the general officer, it's for the Hmong people, not for that clan. So, on Facebook, I see so much pride. I see pride in parents and siblings when their sons or daughters, or when they graduate from basic training or they get to a new rank. So I understand that pride because my parents felt that same pride, and that pride is because of our ties to the military for what they did in the war in Laos. So, it's been a tough journey because it is time away from family. It's not just your extended family, but your immediate family, especially when you are deployed. And for the younger folks, we have been in a state of war since 2001. So for them, it's even tougher because they've always been in a state of war. So I know it's tough, but as I said, if you're considering staying in and you want to progress in your rank, reach out to people, because I was fortunate. I had some great leaders and I had some great mentors along the way. And sometimes you have to ask someone to be your mentor, and don't be afraid to do that. I think most Hmong people are quiet and shy. So I don't mean that as a bad stereotype, but we are. So reach out to good people. If you see a good leader, reach out to them, ask for guidance, and you'll find out that most of them will be honored to serve as your mentor. So like I said, I'm very honored, very lucky, but I had a lot of help along the way. Thank you.
If Paco, Terry, if I can interrupt, follow up with a question. Colonel Hall, I'm just curious, during your time in service, did you ever have any members of Hmong descent who served under your leadership? I'm just curious.
No, never. I'll talk about later why I didn't have that, but no, never had that opportunity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could I just jump in real quick here?
Mm-hmm.
I want to acknowledge now, acknowledge that Colonel Yee Hang. He is the first Hmong to graduate from the West Point. Okay, so that's a big thing, right? To graduate from West Point, it is extremely difficult to get into West Point, and he is the first ones to make it through West Point and to graduate from there. And then the second thing is that it is extremely difficult to get promoted to a full colonel. So to colonel, colonel plan na, to lieutenant colonel like guna si to colonel suit na, colonel plan na. It's very, very difficult to get promoted to that rank. It's not very simple. You got to serve very long time, and you got to do your job extremely well, very extremely good leadership in order for him to promote it. So we have to acknowledge that Colonel Yee Hang, he's the first, not only graduate from West Point as the first, but also as a colonel. So and like he said, we hopefully that in the future we will have general officers to come along. I was hoping that he would get picked up for 07, but unfortunately he decided to retire a little bit earlier.
So thank you.
Yeah. And Dr. Yaaj, for you talked about your role in the military was really in healthcare services, and you are now continuing on as a doctor of pharmacy, right? So how did you feel that your work or the military prepare you for this field, for your passion in healthcare and medicine?
Well, so the practice of healthcare, whether you are a physician, a nurse, a pharmacist, or that type, is no different. The professional credential, the licensing, we must have those from a particular state. So we maintain our professional license. We got to pass our board. We got to go through the proper school. If nursing, got to go through nursing school. Pharmacy, got to go through pharmacy. Medical doctor, do that. So while we're serving, we wear the uniform. And so when there's a war, we also deploy with the hospital to the war zone. But when we're in the US, when there's no war, or in Korea or in Germany, we wear our uniform on a daily basis to go to work. But then at the same time, we also hire a whole bunch of civilians to work with us. And typically the military officers will be the director or the chief of that particular department or that particular service, and then all the civilian would work under them. But the practice of pharmacy itself is, there is no different than the University of Minnesota or any medical center. Pharmacy works pharmacy. We follow the FDA guideline. We follow everything. We use the same medication that are approved by the FDA. When we deploy, we use the same medication. We follow the same standard. And if you have a, you don't just say, well, we're in a combat zone, or no, we're treating this foreigner, or we're treating this POW, we're going to treat them any different. The American military hospital do not do that. We follow the same guidelines of any civilian hospital. We use the same medication. And what happened is that I always get these questions all the time from nhớ là cứ gì cho cứ tì lô gì cho phong yêu na cứ bắt chip bao na bao ta thầu cứ bây giờ tới chồng bò mà rong gọi cho chua cứ tha hạt mua rượu chang hay rong chang lệ nó bây giờ. The reality in the military is that there is no different. We use the same medication cứ ta cao mong tỏ the civilian hospital or the military. The military do not use any special medication that are more potent. They use the same thing. But there are a lot of research in the military when we go to different environment, when we face different disease, that the military steps up and they do a lot of the research. So sometimes we may use research medication, but we still follow the same investigational protocol set by the FDA. Right, so the practice of pharmacy, the practice of nursing, physician, we follow the same rules and guideline. In fact, most of our board certified is in the military is one of the highest as comparisons to the civilian world. So, but from the pharmacy perspective, we have I basically in charge of all the pharmacists, all the technicians, and everybody else's that comes under the purview of the pharmacy. So in the military hospital, in order for medications to be accepted to be used within the hospital, we have a committee that sets the policy, and typically either myself or another physician would chair that particular committee to, and we would select that particular drug. Once that drug is selected, then it's very difficult for us to go ahead and switch to a different drug until we go ahead and get approval through the committee. So that's basically the only difference. So a physician can't just say, they can't just write for any drug that they want. If they write for a drug that they don't have it, and the physician says, well, I'm the physician, you guys have to give it, then typically I would resolve those issues with the physician, and we would work it out, and then to get it go through. But typically all the military physicians and all the pharmacists, we work closely together. So I would say you could transition from the civilian to the military, and transition from the military to the civilian world interchangeably with no difficult, no relearning of anything new. It's just the same practice. Healthcare is healthcare.
Follow up, Dr. Yang. Now that you're back in civilian life, are you still practicing as a pharmacist? And if so, to
No, right. Unfortunately, right after I retired, and I was still in that window of trying to, just relax for a year or so before I go back. This is the COVID pandemic hit. So I just kind of said, well, since the pandemic is still here, so I'm just kind of laying back, enjoying fishing and enjoying running around, babysitting my granddaughter. And so right now I'm not practicing anything since 2019 when I retired. I'm just waiting until the pandemic is over before I would decide whether or not I want to go back into the service. Then maybe by that time I'm too old already, and so maybe I might just want to continue to just go fishing and hunting and stuff like that.
Fishing is fun. And so next question is to both of you, and we'll start with you, Colonel Han. In your U.S. military service, did you run across any other Hmong Americans also serving? And do you think that the number has increased? And any guesses on why that is? What do you think the future holds for Hmong Americans, U.S. military service?
Yeah, unfortunately, I did not. Dr. Yang and I, when we joined, it was early 90s, and we were, I think we were too old for, and most of the younger people were too young. So when we first joined, there wasn't enough of the Hmong population serving. I think we are seeing more join. So for me, when I was in the Army, when most people think of Army and Marine and Navy and Air Force, they see those commercials, so they think that's what we do. But for me, my path was a bit non-traditional. So I worked with that kind of the Army for about 9 years. I was working with the tanks that you see on TV. And then at my 9-year mark, the Army and like the other services have a different side to them, where they do like the procurement, the buying, the systems development to build the systems that they need. So I switched over from working with tanks to doing that kind of stuff. So the places I've been are non-traditional. So I wasn't going to like the Fort Hood or the Fort Bliss or Fort Campbell, where normal soldiers go. So I was in places like Lima, Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania, New York City, Columbus, Ohio. So I didn't have the opportunity to interact with a lot of the Hmong youth who were coming in. I did see, as I was getting later on my career, when I was deployed, to see some Hmong men and women coming over. So that was probably the only opportunity that I got to meet them. I think, like I said, the war, I think, as a parent, I have kids, so I worry about my kids, I worry about their safety. So being in a state of war, since 2001, I think some parents are very reluctant to let their kids join the military, because you never want to lose a child. So I think some parents didn't want their kids to join the military, and I totally understand that. So I understand why that is. So I think the numbers have gone down a little bit, but maybe they're coming back up. But now with the war in Ukraine, it's hard to say. I think like I said, for me and Dr. Yang, and I think some of the other, I don't know exactly how many lieutenant colonels we have, but we have quite a few. We have a lot of majors too. And even from the officer rank, we have the enlisted rank too. So we have some who have achieved that rank. So it's not for everybody. To serve in the military is a calling that it's difficult for some people to understand. Not because they haven't in a bad way. It's just it's a calling, because you're basically and Dr. Yang can attest to this, that when you're in the military, you don't make a lot of money. When I graduated and was serving, a lot of my peers who went to college with, who I went to high school with, they were making a lot more money than I was. So there are a lot of times where it was just a struggle to pay the bills, and so you don't make a lot of money in the military. So it's a calling to serve your country and to serve your fellow humanity. So but I hope that we'll see more Hmong youth joining and also staying in, because it's, like I said, it's a great great calling, and I'll talk to them about that later as far as what those benefits are. So.
And Colonel Han, just curious, know that you're also back in civilian life. What are you doing? Are you fishing too, or?
So, yeah, I'm jumping a little bit ahead. So, when you retire as a full colonel, your retirement pay is pretty good. So, I have a comfortable life, but I get bored. So, and I'm not a big fisherman, so I don't fish a lot. I do like to bike, and I do like to run. So, one quick story before I retired. Right when I retired, I joined a bicycling group, and we rode a bicycle across the country in 20-some days. So, but no, I'm gonna probably go back to work for a little bit, just because I still have 2 kids that I have to pay for college, and it's like I said, I get bored too easily. So, I am coming up to Minnesota to be closer to my parents as they get older. So, I also want to be able to help take care of them too. So.
And like Dr. Yang, do you live in Minnesota too, or?
Yeah, I actually live in Woodbury right now. So yeah. So from my perspective on the Hmong in the military, because I normally go into a base, and traditionally, because the hospital, everybody comes to get treatments and sick calls and stuff like that. So we do see quite a few Hmong that join the military. Unfortunately, I see very few officers that comes through. There's only few and far between. But everywhere we go, we always see the PV1 to a specialist to sergeant. And then fortunately, I was able to see a couple E7 that we are very good friend with, and now that they've been promoted to like one in the Air Force and one in the Army, and then my nephew just got promoted to an E8, and he's actually got first sergeant. His unit is in Poland right now, just kind of being there. But everywhere we go, we have my family, at least for myself, is that everywhere we go, we always see all these young Hmong men and women in the military. So we always grab them and say, hey, come over to my house. Tôi tập biết chế mấy sáng đó khắp bên mấy sáng đó phải mấy sáng đó tao cao thì hắn nói chế tôi tập biết chế nói chế bố tôi chế thằng thứ bố tao cần nó chỉ nó chế bố tôi chế bố yên hù bé chế bố cho cầu tự lên là cầu tây ra một chuyện lên cầu tự lên nữa bố tôi cho tập biết chế bé ở khắp bên ở phải cho bố nó thì hắn đó. But the unfortunate thing that I see is that hey, do you want to go to OCS, Officer Candidate School? You want to go to Warrant School, or you should take some college class right now. And unfortunately, very few take those offers. There's only a very few that will do that, but the majority of the time they just say, no, I'm just doing my time, and I think I'm going to get out. And so it's very it's good to see that the Army have shaped them into a good Hmong men and women, but at the same time, sometimes I wish that some of them would be more aggressive, taking college class, and by the time they get out, they would get the bachelor degree and then use the GI Bill to continue to get the master's degree or so. But very few take that opportunity. The other thing that I find is that open up now, you dig. For me is that you have to dig the colonel's talking to me because I'm just the E4 specialist. I'm just the E5 Thế khi mà nhớ là cái phụ nữ hát của chấm nhiều cho của chấm nhiều lúc ta hát về bốn thứ cho young soldier bốn thứ cho nó thẳng nó they tend to be opening up more. but I think like earlier Colonel Hang said is that I wish that some of these younger soldiers would use us as a mentor and ask us questions and not be afraid. And if they need something, they need to let us know so that we can support them that way. We could guide them in the right way.
So we talked a little bit in your bio about where you were commissioned overseas, right? Could you talk to a little bit about the country you visited? You know, we talked earlier about you're right, you wanted to join to see the world, but what I think is so interesting too is you get to tell people about like Hmong folks, right? So tell us about your time overseas.
Yeah, so currently right now I am stationed overseas. I live in Germany, and you know, even before I got to Germany, so my first assignment after I graduated from college, I graduated in December like 20th, and I think it was January 10th. I was at my first duty station. I ended up going to Texas. I was there in Texas for a few years, and then I went to California, and then I went to Virginia. And then from Virginia, I came here to Germany. But before I even got to Germany, all the places I have been were, you know, outside of the US. I've been to England, I've been to France, I've been to Turkey, Italy, I've been deployed to Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Iraq. Yeah, and all those were just from work. And then after I got stationed here in Germany, I've done some traveling with my family, and we've visited almost half of Europe so far. So I've been pretty fortunate that I've gotten to travel a lot. I've gotten to see a lot of things. My parents and my in-laws are actually coming here to visit us next month, and we have this big European trip planned. And it really is. I've done a lot of traveling, and I'm very fortunate that the Air Force has given me the opportunity to just see the world outside of the US.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about particularly your experience serving as a woman in the military, and your work in the Air Force. Somebody actually in our comment section wanted to know if you were a pilot. So tell us about your experience as a woman and then also in the Air Force. Yeah.
You know, it's very funny. So at my graduation, I was in my full uniform, and I remember somebody saying, "Oh yeah, you're in the Air Force. So does that mean that you fly on a plane and, you know, do the whole, you know, hear the exits?" Doing that whole thing. And I was like, "Oh no, I'm not a stewardess," right? But a lot of the misconception is that when you're in the Air Force, you're a pilot, right? So I'm actually a contracting officer by trade. So my job is I negotiate contracts on behalf of the United States Air Force. That is my job in the Air Force. I am currently stationed with NATO. So everything you guys see on the news about what's going on overseas in, you know, Ukraine and all that, I'm involved kind of small. I have a small part to play in that, just because I am attached to a NATO unit, but a lot of it has to do with dealing with the commercial sector. So I do a lot of acquisitions. I deal with a lot of contracts with whether it's procurement or real life support. So that's kind of the job that I do right now. But in the Air Force, when I'm not attached to NATO, yeah, my job is procurement. I deal a lot with business. And so yeah, you know, it's an interesting dynamic working as a woman in the Air Force. Like, for my experience in the military, you know, as a woman, my experience is no different than most women in the workforce, with the exception that sometimes my office is in a hostile territory, but there are pros and cons to being a woman in the United States Air Force, right? I've been fortunate to work with some of the most professional, intelligent, and dedicated people in the world. With that said, being a female officer in the United States military, it does not mean that I'm exempt from any kind of sexism that happens. And especially being a Hmong woman in the military has been very interesting, right? Like I said earlier, I'm the oldest of four. I'm the only girl, and have 3 younger brothers. So when, talking about telling my parents that I wanted to join, and, that discussion with my dad, it has its own dynamic in that my parents had their fears of their only daughter joining the military, right? And I think a lot of parents have that same fear when they hear their daughter saying, "Oh, I'm going to go join the military." That is predominant. Everybody has this image of predominantly male, but it's very interesting when you join the military, and not only am I Hmong, but being an Asian female in the military is very different. I think the percentage is that there's only about 3% of us in the military overall, whether it's Air Force, Army, Navy, Marines. There's only 3% of us that are Asian. So, and I'm sure being Hmong American is even less. So, yeah, it's been very interesting, and I've been lucky that, as an American woman, not just Asian, but as an American woman, in the Air Force, the military has a 0 tolerance policy against discrimination, especially on the basis of gender. So even with that said, there are some instances of a lot of sexism that does happen. Not every woman experiences the same level of discrimination in the workforce, but I would say most women, whether they work for the commercial sector, private sector, government, non-government, we encounter some level of sexism, as a woman in general in the military, or not just in the military, but overall. For example, when I worked in Virginia, I worked in a unit that was like 100 plus unit. It was 101 or 100 plus people unit, and about 30% of us were female. So the type of sexism that I dealt with was different than when I was stationed in Texas, where I was like one of maybe 3 women in a unit of 50. Don't make me do public math, but I think that's about like 6%. And in Texas, I would hear comments like, "You're a woman, go decorate this board or go plan this party." And, it had nothing to do with my job description. So that task was really assigned to me just purely because I was a female. But the sexism that I would have dealt with in Virginia was very different. It would, I could be the only contracting officer sitting at a table, but a male colleague who is not the subject matter expert, who doesn't really understand contracting, would explain to me what my job is, right? It's that type of sexism where it's a very different dynamic than when you're dealing with a predominantly male career field, because in contracting it's pretty even. So that has its dynamic as an American woman working in the military. But I would say okay, we're gonna start now. as a Hmong female, as a Hmong woman in the military, it has its own unique dynamic, right? I try to have a sense of humor about it, just because it's my coping mechanism not to be so I'm not so angry about it. But for example, right now I work with NATO. So that means on a daily basis, I am sitting at a table that includes 30 different nations. I'm collaborating with countries that influence most of Europe. But when I go home to the Hmong community, I'm constantly reminded that and that and I'm dismissed to the kitchen, right? So, and not to talk bad about the Hmong community, but in our traditions, but the irony is not lost on me. So at work, I carry a big stick, but at home in the Hmong community, my value is reduced to my ability to cook. And my husband, who is also Hmong, and he struggles with the dynamic too, because he understands that regardless of who I am on the global stage, the male Hmong community will not invite me to sit at that table, like that Hmong table. And honestly, he and I are not willing to die on that hill and fight that battle, because it's just not worth it. So it is different being an American Hmong woman in a position of power. And just because it's funny to me because the responses and the advice that I normally get are very different. For example, mainstream American advice to women is going to always be take up space, be assertive. It's not being bossy, it's leading, and ask hard questions and don't back down. But my experience with advice from my male relatives have been very different. For example, in my graduation party, everyone expressed how proud they are of me, and they came and to show appreciation, and and like congratulated my parents. However, it was interesting that how often I heard the phrase, your dad would be so proud of you if you were a son, right? And I know there are plenty of women out there who probably heard the same things, right? So first of all, my dad is my biggest champion. My entire life, he has never made me feel like I was less than because I was born a girl. I have never felt like he loved me less or treated me less just because I was born a girl. And I will say that because of that, I am the strong, headstrong woman I am today. And he's always encouraged me to dream big and go for what I want. And also, if that meant breaking down barriers, he was completely behind me, and he encouraged me to shatter them and break them all down, right? So yeah, I would describe my dad as, the modern Hmong feminist, if there is a definition of that. Like, for example, even at my wedding, my husband came and like, and even then, my dad was very adamant about, we talk a lot in the Hmong community, we talk a lot about the Hmong bride price. And even then, my dad was very adamant about not having a bride price because to him, he felt like and to him, it was important to him to let me know. And I don't think it was more important that he was letting me know, but he was letting everybody else know that he's not selling his daughter in a way. It was, my daughter is getting married, but I'm not losing my daughter. I'm getting a son, right? And so that was, that was kind of, it was important to me, and at least it meant a lot to me that my dad felt that way. And even with my dad feeling that way, it was very interesting what I heard from my male relatives, right? So for example, my brothers, I love my brothers. They will always love and support me, and I know that. And I also know that they love my husband. And sometimes I feel like they support my husband a lot because they're getting back at me for being the tough older sister, right? So, and I love my brothers for it, and I love that they love my husband. But it's interesting what I hear from my male relatives, right? So when it comes to words of wisdom, especially when it comes to the success of Hmong women, I get a lot of don't forget that, in other words, they remind me that, even though if you are a position of power when you're at work, when you come home, remember that your husband, don't belittle your husband, right? Which is interesting because it's almost like they're assuming that I treat my husband like he's beneath me just because I'm in the military and I'm an Air Force officer. And it's interesting because I don't think that it's because they assume that I treat my husband that way. I think a lot of it is, I don't think they know how to respond to women who are in those positions. And I think they have a hard time of tailoring their advice to match, right? And it's interesting because I try not to get mad about it, and I just kind of brush it off sometimes, but it is very interesting because I do notice that, it's because it's not terrible advice because every marriage has its special dynamic, but it's interesting that the advice that I usually get from my relatives are always, be a good wife to my husband versus the advice that they give to my Hmong brothers or my cousins or anything like that. Like it's usually about the advice that my Hmong brothers get is be courageous and be strong, do a good job, and do your job well. And I just wish that the advice that they give to the Hmong men are the same advice they give to my Hmong sisters. And, like tell our Hmong men to be good husbands, and then tell our Hmong women to go and conquer the world. And, there's nothing that they can't do, that sort of advice. So, I guess that's the difference between being a Hmong woman that I've noticed. Those are more things that I've noticed dealing with the Hmong community.
Yeah, no, I'm also an oldest daughter, Major Lovu, and I'm also my dad is very humbled because he has 5 daughters, and so he has to.
Okay.
I only have one brother.
You know what that's like, right?
I only have one brother, so my dad is true. He's also but it is harder for him to fight the patriarchy, but he very much is always yes, exactly, and I think that's the thing too is a lot of times sometimes it's usually one or the other, right? They're strong because they have fathers like ours who are very supportive, or sometimes not, and so they've had to make their own path. And so yeah, no, I have a sense of something like that too. And even it doesn't matter because there's still that expectation, even though we work and we're professionals, there still very much is that expectation. And so no, I appreciate your insight on that.
Yeah, if anybody were to ask me what kind of advice I would give to the Hmong community, like especially to our Hmong women, I would say, continue to make space. We are sisters, we are wives, we are mothers, we are leaders, and we are anything we want. And to the Hmong men, like I'm gonna encourage them to embrace our strong women, but at the same time, like encourage your sons and your daughters to change the world.
Yeah.
It's not a pie. It's one succeeding does not diminish the other. And so, yeah.
Yeah. So in your military service, did you run across any other Hmong Americans who were serving? And do you think that number's increased, or any guesses why that is?
I have actually met a few Hmong people, and usually, I'm sure the other two guest panels will agree. Anytime I run into one, it's because our last names are written on our chest. So a lot of times you run into somebody, like I think I ran into somebody that had the last name Hyung. And I remember the first time I saw him, I was deployed. First time I saw him, I was just like, oh my God, you're Hmong. And he kind of laughed and he's like, oh yeah, my name gave it away, right? So, because before I got married, I had Lo written on my chest, but after I got married, it was Vu. And so Vu is can be a Chinese or Vietnamese last name. So I think most people kind of look at me like, well, we don't know if you're Hmong or not. But so usually when I see somebody with a Hmong last name, I'm very adamant about being like, oh my God, are you Hmong? Because we don't see a lot of people that are Hmong. And so it is. I think that the number has increased over the years. And it could be just because social media has gotten so big and we're all kind of finding our way to each other or reaching out to each other. I know that there is a Hmong group on Facebook where it's a Hmong military group, and it is our way of kind of reaching out and touching base with each other. When somebody moves to another location, we do a pretty good job of posting on there and saying, hey, I'm going to this location. Is anybody there? Or, has anybody been there? Kind of give a, networking. So it's been pretty interesting that, it's great to see. It really is.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's really great to hear too. As someone who, has folks who knows military members who are overseas or could potentially be stationed elsewhere. Earlier you made some really great advice for young men and women. A lot of people, when we shared who was going to be on our show, they were really excited to see and hear from you. And as we close the show tonight, do you have any final words to any of our young aspiring leaders who may, one, be serving, or maybe want to serve in the military someday?
Joining the military, it is a lifestyle change. I get this question a lot, like a lot of young people who are getting ready to join the military or have signed that contract. to join the military and they reach out to me and they say, hey, I'm getting ready to join. And a lot of times I tell them, the military is a lifestyle change, whether your contract is 4 years or you're in it for the long haul. I've been in for 12 years. I got 8 years left before I can retire. I'm in it for the long haul, but I went in thinking I was only going to do 4. And it is a complete lifestyle change. And don't make that decision lightly. Just because when you join the military, you really are signing a contract. And that breach of contract has some negative consequences. But at the same time, when you join the military, regardless of what branch you're in and regardless of what your job is going to be, you're going to get some kind of training, some kind of education that will help you outside of the military. And there's no shame in doing just 4 years. And there's no shame in saying, you know what, I'm going to do the full 20. And don't join just because, because I mean, you can do that, but go in with a plan, think it through, because it's not something that you should just sign away lightly. Because when you think about the things that are going on in the world, especially I'm thinking about some of our Hmong people who joined the military in the year 2000, 2021. None of them thought that 9/11 was going to happen. And even my sister-in-law, she joined the military, she joined the army in 2021. She was at basic training when 9/11 happened. And yeah, I don't think that in her head, she thought that she was going to join the military to go into a conflict. So those are, when you make a decision like that, just think it through. That would be my advice to them. It's not saying that it's a serious, it is a pretty serious contract, but yeah.
Do you have any final words, Dr. Yao or Colonel Haam, that you want to share to our young aspiring leaders who want to be and join the military service? I know earlier you mentioned offering to offer guidance to people currently serving. Is there anything else you'd want to offer to folks maybe who are thinking about joining the military?
Yeah, so I'll start. So first of all, I want to say thank you for your service to our country. You are in a noble profession, so thank you for what you're doing. I think my advice is 2 things. First of all, if you can stay in, continue to serve. I know it's hard. Dr. Yang will tell you it's hard, especially in the environment that we're in now. But I'll tell you that when I was young, like you, most of you, I was like, wow, goodness, 9 years, that's a long time. But when I went to visit one of my friends, his dad was a Navy person. He retired. I mean, he didn't retire, but he only did 3 years. And he says, Yee, if you can stay in, that pension that you get will do you good. And really, it like I said, it's a safety net that, and also gives you skills that you can use when you retire. So, think long term about the future, what the future holds for you. Again, we all have different paths. We all, I don't know what your situation is like, but if you can stay in, as Dr. Yang said, reach out to us, social media, for whatever advice, or if you just want to talk about whatever. So do that. And finally, for me, and I think service isn't just being in the military. So, serve your community, serve your neighbors, serve your family, whatever capacity that is, whether it's the Peace Corps, nonprofit, being a volunteer. That to me, I think is enough for the youth. Like I said, not everyone has the same calling to join the military, but above all things, just serve humanity, be kind to people, and because like I said, if you can serve or do other things, you'll realize that people are all the same, and we all share that the same bond of humanity. So again, final thing, if you can stay in, and finally, thank you for your service.
Yeah, Dr. Yang.
Okay, của cho họ ta còn nên hàng tôi hạt từ cho soldier nè của sang focus cho này cho gì nè bây nhớ tới chấm blo mà bây cho bây nào bây gì tới họ này bộทหารmà bộปีlại cứ của cao nó chỉ ship 3 ship 2 ship 8 cha 3 cha 2 cha 8 nó chỉ bộ mong bắt 3 right 3 chỉ bộ mong 900bộ mong họ nó chỉ bộ chỉ của cao nó 2 colonel nèแต่ชิมาตัวสุดท้ายชาวอเมริกันนะไม่จะมีตู้มีโยนอยาแต่พวก join enlisted นั่นจะเกิดทาง high school ซื้อพวกมองนั่นจะยาแต่ไม่จริงต่อแต่เอาไปนู่นนอกุตุตู้เนี่ยต่อกรณีเลยคือไปหนอนั่นมาอีหยวนจอจะขอแต่ย้อนแต่ชาวหนอมาพวกจีนเจสันเลยหันเดอจะจะ enlist นะพวกเยซู E9 ซึ่งจะพวกต่างละหันนะจะยาแต่ก็ยังมองจะ officer เลยคือพวกแต่ในร้อยเลยคือ103 102จัด108น้อนั่นจะเลยคือสอนนักสองกัปตันกองดังกอลเนลนั่นนะมาพวกจะจุมองกับห้องเฮนร้อยต่อยลูนั่นนะจะห้องเฮนร้อยต่อยลูมาพวกชายเลยจะต่อเจจะสั้นน้อมาพวกชายจะจุดตัวกอลเนลจะยังเล่นได้ไม่จำหน่ายจัดสีนะอย่าแต่ไม่ปลูกต่อแต่ไม่ตัวมิโยนนี่เจเจ้าฮะนี่ยิ่งmore capacity 有我到จะเข้าหรือน้อนั่นนะเจไม่จุหากับพวกน้อถอคือแต่พวกที่ตอน join the military นั่นนะเจกับพวกถอคือพวกมอง college นั่นเจกับพวก join ROTC แล้วอย่าแต่ถอคือพวกตา high school นั่นกับพวก apply จ West Point Air Force Academy Annapolis แต่น้อไอชื่อพวกถอคือพวกเกิดตา high พวกเกิดตา college นั่นเจพวกกับ commission เจพวกชาตอนในร้อยแต่ยังเช่าเจ็บปวดชาเลยมองสุดตัวกรณีตัวยังชอบเนาะพอยาแต่พวกเจ้าหน้าหู enlist ซื้อนั่นเจ้าไม่จะ encourage พวกแต่ก็พวกนั้นพวกจะมอง OCS แล้วยาแต่ continue to get the bachelor degree and from go ก่อนพวกมองสุดเก๋คือแต่ from green to go ชื่อพวกนั้นพวกจะมีโยนนั่นใช้เยซูคือกรณีตัวยังชอบอย่าพวกกับ commission นั่นนะพยาแต่พวกจริงนั่นนู้ว่าเขาหรือเลยคือพวกขอหานะจะยาพวกตัวอีปังทหารเลยพวกจริงจะเกิดแต่ sergeant first class master sergeant แต่นั่นซึ่งนั่นจะพวกเจจิตตัวในร้อยอีจาเลยนั่นจะกูมากูสั่ง encourage แต่ไม่จะหนาจัดสีนะอย่าแต่ไม่จีเป้าจู่เก๋เกิดแต่ไปยอดเตาเลยจางไปตัวมียอดทะเลย้อนเจต่อจะสั้นคือยอมองจู่ย้อนเลยคืออีออตัวคือยอดหัวนะนั่นจะก็ไม่สนใจมัวไม่จูผู้ต้นจูเป็ดทางช่องดาวช่องใดต้นจูเป็ดแต่กูตัวมิโยนร้องเลยน้อหาก็ตัวมิโยหันเดencourage ก็พวก contact เป็นแล้วมา provide จะ information ในจุดพวกนั่นสิ
โอเคก็ช่วยได้ที่พอเราก็จะอธิบายแค่นี้เดี๋ยวเราไปยันนั่นสิเชื่อได้I'm so very honored and that the three of you could join us tonight, Colonel Hang, Dr. Yang, and Major Vwj, for sharing your Sunday evening with us. We are grateful. We are grateful for your service, for the service of all the veterans, for all of those who have currently served and have served, such as yourselves in the U.S. military, and of course to all of our veterans who have served in the secret war. We're grateful for your service as we honor you all on Armed Forces and Memorial Day. Shout out to my co-hosts, Jay and Paku, for their assistance every week or every time we put on the show. We'll be back in a few weeks to wrap up, hopefully the end of the legislative session. But again, we're grateful for y'all to join us tonight. Good night, everybody, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us at Ome Chok meeting. Who eat on room, who pet on the hopefully we will meet in person sometime in the near future.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay,
take care.
bye.